Welcome to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I am your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, and I am back temporarily today in the Sunflower House. I love bringing these podcasts to you, my audience, who I adore, and we're bringing you great content from speakingofwomenshealth.com. But as you may or may not know, not only am I the executive director of Speaking of Women's Health, but I also direct our Center for Specialized Women's Health and run a specialty women's health fellowship. And I want to keep giving you, our listeners, the best content that we have on our site. And so I want to introduce our wonderful executive producer of the podcast, Leigh Klekar, and she is behind the scenes and our social media manager for Speaking of Women's Health. And she is going to guest podcast, including today. So take it away, Leigh.
Welcome to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I'm your host, Leigh Klekar, the executive producer for the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. And I'm excited to host this episode as it's my first, and you'll be hearing from me in the future as well as I share some really great women's health tips. On this episode, we are going to be talking about work-life balance and trying to manage it all. I know this is something that I struggle with as a working mom, and I'm sure many of you do too, no matter what stage of life you're in right now. I mean, all of us women need reminders to take a break from work, take a break from cleaning the house, paying bills, a little raising our kids, and we need to do something nice for ourselves once in a while. So Dr. Rebecca Stark, who's an OBGYN at the Cleveland Clinic, she wrote a column on the Speaking of Women's Health website about work-life balance, and it was called Wonder Woman, Women, Families, Work. Is there such a thing as work-life balance? And is there really a Wonder Woman? I mean, I don't know, but I do know it is a challenge for all of us to figure out this work-life balance. You know, family, work, and self are the most important elements in anyone's life. And it's hard to make all elements a top priority at one time. You know, hence some weeks my top priorities fluctuate and can even fluctuate day to day and even minute to minute, as I'm sure many of you can relate. You know, you're working hard, you've got a good flow going, then all of a sudden you get a call from your kid's school that they're sick, you need to go pick them up, leave work, or you have a new project at work that now is going to change your whole week schedule. I mean, everything can just fluctuate. And, women are socialized to be caretakers of others. So we take on those responsibilities so much more than men. I mean, we want to have a career outside the home, but continue to try to juggle the, traditional responsibilities after hours, the laundry, it's my worst, cleaning, dusting. I mentioned even like just remembering to pay the bills and stay on top of all of those household responsibilities. And this is a really interesting statistic. Over 70% of married women with children under the age of 18 are employed outside the home. And really, I mean, these women, they struggle, or I struggle as well, to achieve, that male standard at work. So, doing our best, getting promoted, being where we think we should be at work, while also trying to maintain this like home life and, mom life. I try to do everything all at once. I don't ever say no. That's also something I really want to talk about in this podcast episode is say no, because, when we say yes to too many things, we get so stressed out. And then when we're stressed, we can't do everything, to our best standards. Women are also less likely to be in powerful position as men. So women find it harder to say no to others' requests. And then we feel guilty if we can't please everyone. So we spend a lot less time nurturing our own emotional and physical needs. And if we even do consider taking, a day off or going to get a massage, some people can perceive that as being selfish. And really, I mean, we need to say no, because women, I mean, if we want to have it all, we can, but we just cannot do it all at the same time. So Dr. Stark provided some great tips in her column because, as a busy, working doctor, she has 4 children and she finds ways to balance her busy work life and a full family and, her personal life, things that make her happy. So her first tip is want more energy, then exercise. So really sometimes when we're so tired, the last thing we want to do is put on those running shoes or walking shoes or go to a gym. But really, Dr. Stark, says that, as a lifelong runner herself, she is a firm believer that physical exercise turns into mental and emotional well-being. So she goes for 3 to 5 mile runs every day at 5 a.m. And she just goes on autopilot at this point. Her life requires so much multitasking as a busy physician, and she gets energy from her runs. And that's how she, doesn't drag all day at work. The exercise charges her. And I agree with Dr. Stark, and that exercise gives me more energy, makes me feel better overall. I cannot get up at 5 a.m. and run. I do love running, but mine are more like 1 and 3 mile runs with walks in between. But that works for me. And, that makes me happy. Even like a long walk for some people is great. And strength training. I know as, we get older, we need to really, boost that metabolism more, and strength training will help do that. I've recently started in the last few years and I really don't enjoy it. Lifting weights, free weights, it's the worst for me. But I started doing this bar Pilates class, and it's amazing. And my instructor incorporates weights with it. So we're moving, we're doing light weights, and it's great. So I found that works for me. But as we get older, we do need to add that strength training in, and it will increase your metabolism and improve your muscles and your bones. Also, you can check out your local community center or YMCA, as so many of them have the free weights, they have the machines, they have classes that incorporate strength training. As I mentioned, Pilates, yoga. Yoga is great. It uses your own body weight. So that's considered strength training. So if you're like me and you don't love lifting weights, try the yoga, try Pilates, and those are also really great for the core. So again, I notice as I'm getting older, that waist of mine is definitely not the same, and I have to work extra hard. So let's talk about the second tip that Dr. Stark recommends for us for this work-life balance, and that's keeping your eye on your own ball. So Dr. Stark has spent her entire career working with women, and she knows how often they compare themselves to others. And she tells them, keep your eye on your own ball. For stay-at-home moms, that may mean maintaining their own identity apart from a career. And she reminds women that she works with that no one can do their job 24/7. So moms have a right to get help so they can get away from home responsibilities and then, come back refreshed. For moms that are challenged with the work-life balance, focus on what works for you and your family, and not how you stack up to your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends, or your families. And for women who do not have children, she reinforces that having or not having kids does not define you. Being defined by your own thoughts, your own passions, your career, community service are all part of a full life. So I love all these tips. I know that I compare myself to others all the time, and it's just not healthy. I try to remind myself to focus on my life and what I have to be grateful for. And I do think social media has escalated a lot of this comparison. You see someone's post and, it's a beautiful family picture of them on a beach, and they're all smiling and their hair looks beautiful and they have matching outfits. And you think, oh, wow, they have a perfect life. And I'm sitting at home at work. But social media use has, been linked to depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And recent studies by the National Center for Health Research also suggest people who frequently use social media, they feel more depressed and less happy with life than those who spend more time on non-screen related activities. So stop scrolling through your timeline and just focus on what's going on in your life right now. And I think a really great tip that I've heard from several women that I've worked with in the past is to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say just one thing that you're grateful for. And I recently started doing this because it's just kind of reminded me that, what I have in my life and what I should be happy about. So the third tip is know that you can't do it all and ask for help. So the most common mistake women make is not asking for help. We can't be all things to all people all of the time. So don't be reluctant to ask for help. Avoid combining too many projects. Delegate if necessary and learn to say no. There are some things I just can't keep up with. My house is not perfectly clean. I cannot and do not make every meal. And I use my husband as a teammate. He does a lot of the cooking, and then I handle the grocery shopping and the laundry and cleaning the house. We work together, making lunches in the morning, getting the kids off to school, helping with homework. I take, what I'm a little bit better at, which is English, and then my husband helps with the math. And we did get our kids involved with chores pretty young. My sons, they have been doing their own laundry since the fourth grade. And the kids, they, handle the trash, taking it out. They're in charge of the dishwasher because that's another thing I really don't enjoy doing. And now they also, my oldest just got his first job. So I'm really proud of him for that. And he'll be making his own money. But I think that is something, because our family is a team and we all live together in this house and we need to rely on each other and help each other out. And, part of success is knowing that you can't do it all. And it's also knowing when to ask for help and how to say no and how to be sure to nurture yourself first. This is a great transition to the next column that I want to talk about, which is a column by our wellness department called The Importance of Self-Care and Why Women Need to Be a Little Selfish. Marita Pompani, who is a holistic psychotherapist in the Center for Integrative and Lifestyle Medicine at Cleveland Clinic. She wrote this column just recently, actually, and she assists patients in the development of personal tools to manage different types of stress and to resolve conflict, navigate transitions in life, and to heal from trauma and address any other kind of common problems. So at various times in our lives, most of us have experienced the steady drip, drip, drip of stressful events until we get to the point where we are overwhelmed and we are facing extremely painful situations. Women, often involved in numerous caregiving roles, regularly overlook their own wellness needs. Here we go. The same message. Compared to men, women are more likely to report a higher incidence of stress-related physical and mental health conditions. And when this is not treated, chronic stress, can happen. And this then increases the risk for, anxiety, depression, migraines, chronic pain, obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease and stroke, chronic disease, memory loss and concentration loss, and just a weaker immune system. And also chronic stress in women can cause problems with menstruation and difficulty getting pregnant. So a frequently promoted form of stress release is called self-care. I've heard this word a lot lately, so I'm really glad that Marita is able to talk about this on speakingofwomenshealth.com. But Many descriptions of self-care dominate articles and headlines, often with various lists of self-care activities like a trip to the beauty shop, nail salon, going shopping. But according to the World Health Organization, self-care is the ability to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability. Basically, self care is anything you do to keep yourself healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. So, engaging in a self care routine is proven to reduce and eliminate many stress responses. So, this will help, a lot with those who suffer from anxiety and depression, suffering from poor concentration, and also from just like frustration and anger, which I know in our midlives, these are three things that tend to get worse. So, I think doing self care and starting it as soon as possible is really important. It can increase our happiness, positive connections with ourselves and others, and improve our energy levels, which we all, I'm sure, can use. So, from a physical health perspective, self care has been clinically proven to reduce heart disease, stroke, and cancer. One of the best ways to reduce physical tension, so it's right, I'm sitting up straight right now, is called soft belly breathing. And that's breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then you expand your belly on the inhale and contract it on the exhale. With practice, this has been found to be the most effective way of managing stress. And when your body is fully relaxed, it is impossible to feel stressed. And also focusing on that breathing, that in and out, your mind then is focusing on the breathing and just kind of making everything else that's stressful in your life fade away. And if you don't already do yoga,
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
and you are stressed out, I highly recommend it because the soft belly breathing is the first thing that I learned in yoga. And honestly, when I'm doing it all, you're told just focus on the breathing, that whole hour of the yoga class. And I also do hot yoga. So I'm also just focusing on the amount of sweat that is happening. But really, it's a great way to relax. And then with the yoga, like we talked about, you're getting that strength training. You're focusing on your core, so you're tightening that core. But, sometimes we need to embrace a form of self-care that involves the discovery and nurturing of our wise inner self. So this form of self-care produces a deeper, longer lasting sense of peace that can carry us through really difficult times. There is a psychologist and an author, and her name is Tara Brach, and she suggests that we use our innate nurturing tendency to befriend and attend to our inner turmoil. So, by pausing and bringing a gentle, mindful awareness to our stress response, then we're enabled to rediscover our belonging to presence, love, and life. So, a few ways to nurture your inner self is quiet personal time, which I know can be hard for a lot of us, but even if you can start with just finding a few minutes. So creating a quiet personal time can help you discover and develop the personal resources that you need to, find that strength to get you through times that are stressful or any other difficult times in your life. So, that perspective, focusing on all that is going well, noting your progress, and gaining the awareness of how a situation could be worse. So I told you earlier in the podcast episode that I've started to, wake up in the morning and just say one thing that I'm grateful for. So I feel like this perspective is really similar to that. And maybe I'm going to even try and take mine one step further and do this. Focus on what's going well in my life at the moment, noting that how it's progressed. So if I'm focused on maybe my exercise routine and that I want to lose 2 pounds, um, that's just an example, but focus on, okay, yes, I, took a walk yesterday and I walked 10 more minutes than I did the day before. And so the part of gaining awareness of how a situation could be worse, it could be I could have an injury that is preventing me from doing my walking and from exercise. Another way to nurture that inner self is gratitude. So I think, again, that goes hand in hand. I just talked about the perspective and gratitude, but I feel like they're really similar. But expressing gratitude, it does increase your optimism, the positive relationships with self and others. And then self awareness. So observing your thoughts, emotions, and interactions provides insight and promotes new healthy thoughts and behavior patterns. So be open to trying any other ways to manage your stress. But, you need to find methods that are best for you. And most importantly, as you care for yourself and for others, you just remember to do things that make you happy and that make you feel whole. So I like some of these activities that she's talked about in her column that she uses to manage stress and refresh the body and mind, taking baths. I'm not a bath taker, but I know several of my friends, they love to take a bath and they have the whole setup with the salts and they light a candle, maybe put some music on or read a book. And they say after, a half hour, just that they just, can go back downstairs to the craziness of the kids and the homework and dinner and just be able to tackle it. So, reading is another way to, help manage stress. And I think it's because when we're reading a book, we're just focused on that. We're not thinking of everything else going on around us. And reading is actually one of my favorite hobbies. I just wish I had more time to read. Doing breathing exercises. So we talked about the belly breathing, and I think that's one of the great breathing exercises you can do to help just find that moment of calmness. Receiving back rubs and massages. Ask your partner you know, or even a friend, for even it could be a hand massage. My daughter, when she was little, she I don't know where she got it from, but she would take our hands and just do these little, gentle, because she was so young, hand massages. And I'll tell you, I would tell her, I'm like, Charlotte, this is so relaxing. And she was doing nothing barely than just kind of rubbing her finger back and forth on my hand. But um, also try listening to relaxation tapes or relaxing podcast, maybe some white noise in the background, meditating, writing in a journal. Again, then instead of waking up in the morning or going into the mirror and expressing your gratitude and your perspective, maybe writing it down in a journal is something that would work better for you. I recently bought a journal for myself and my middle son. And again, just as a way to kind of take a moment for ourselves and write down our feelings, because him and I are not the best with talking about our feelings. So writing it down is easier for us. Meet with a friend. So relationships and friendships are so important, especially for women. So getting together with your friends and, just talking, maybe even going for a walk or a hike so you can do a couple things at the same time, get your exercise and develop those relationships. Napping. Ooh, gosh, that's been a long time since I've taken a nap. But I know my dad, even when he worked, he would come home from work because he worked a really early shift, like 7 to 3, and he would take a nap. And then he would conquer the rest of his day. We talked about walking as, combining it maybe with a friend, but another top stress reducer, is exercise, and just going for a nice walk, can work most of the time to reduce stress. especially if you can go, outside or maybe go to the park, take in the nature, the trees, listen to the sounds of the birds. We have a nice park that's not too far from here that we can walk from our house, and just a half hour walking through there and just focusing on what's around me at that moment really brings down my stress level. Dancing is another great way to manage stress, engaging in spiritual reflection, stretching. Oh, this is great for us women, again, as we get older, is stretching because it can help reduce injuries when we do exercise. So, it's whatever works better for you, if it's stretching before and after your workout, or just stretching can be one of your forms of exercise because you're working on those muscles and that flexibility. And listening to music. I know I listen to music while I work out, so I'm getting a 2-for-1 exercise and music. Um, so I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. And we are so grateful for your support and hope you will consider supporting the podcast, sharing it with others, donating, and leaving a 5-star rating and review. And to catch all the latest from the Speaking of Women's Health podcast, you can subscribe to our podcast at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time in the Sunflower House.
Thanks so much, Leigh. Wasn't that just a fabulous podcast of the Sunflower House? Well, I'm your host and the executive director of Speaking of Women's Health, Dr. Holly Thacker, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Speaking of Women's Health. If you don't already subscribe to our free podcast, please hit follow or subscribe for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or catch us on Rumble. Look for Speaking of Women's Health on the Rumble channel. And if you appreciate all this great information we give you to empower you to be strong, be healthy, and be in charge, you can hit the donate button on Speaking of Women's Health. And don't forget to access our free treatment guidebooks, our social media, our recipes, our breaking health news. You have been listening to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast.